My mother lied to me for years, and it was the kindest thing she ever did. I spent almost my entire childhood without truly knowing who my mother was, at least, not the woman all the teachers at school quietly appreciated. She never said a word, never bragged, and certainly never accepted any thanks. But after she passed away, a single unexpected phone call pulled back the curtain. My mother had secretly paid for field trips for the kids who were left behind. She bought books and birthday cakes for children no one else noticed. The question is, why would someone go to such lengths to hide their kindness? And more haunting still, what would drive a mother to lie? Not to protect her own child, but to shield the hearts of children who weren't even hers. When I was a kid, I went to a prestigious private school, the kind of place where even elementary school students carried Gucci backpacks, got dropped off in Teslas or Range Rovers, and summer break didn't mean going to the park. It meant summer camp in Switzerland. It might sound strange, but that was my normal back then. My family wasn't the wealthiest at school, but we were comfortable. Well off enough that I never had to worry about tuition, textbooks, or the expensive field trips the school organized regularly. Each month, the school would announce a few extracurricular outings, sometimes to a museum, sometimes to a nature reserve or a life skills camp. The costs ranged anywhere from $5 to over $100. No one was ever forced to join, but it was silently understood. If you didn't go, you fell behind. Your name would be on the stay back list. You'd come back to school with nothing to talk about. And worse, you'd be labeled different. I didn't realize it back then. I just remember some quiet classmates who would sit alone on field trip days. Kids I assumed just didn't want to go or were being punished by their parents. Looking back now, I see how naive I was. How careless. Because the truth was, many of those kids couldn't go simply because their parents couldn't afford the fee. The school offered scholarships, sure, but those usually only covered tuition and required coursework. Everything outside of that, even if it was just $20 or $30, became a locked door keeping poorer kids from accessing a broader world. I still remember one time in 4th grade, there was this girl named Jenna. Our class had a field trip to the Science Center, $75 per student. Everyone was excited, everyone except Jenna. She quietly packed her bag like it was a normal school day. When I asked, "Why aren't you going?" she gave me a faint smile and said, "I don't really like noisy places." And I believed her. I had no reason not to. But now, I understand. That was her way of hiding the shame. A shame no child should ever have to feel. It wasn't until years later, after my mother passed away, that I got a call from one of my old teachers. She told me something that stopped me cold. There were days when my mom would quietly walk into the school office and ask, "How many kids aren't going today?" Then she'd cover all the fees. No names, no thanks, never told anyone. That call made me re-examine my whole childhood. And I realized I grew up in an environment where discrimination wasn't based on skin color or grades. It was based on money. And even worse, some kids carried invisible wounds, hurt pride, stunted emotional growth, just because they were short a few dollars. Kids who weren't any different from me, except they started life from a different line. I used to think I understood my mom, the tough, frugal woman who always rolled her eyes whenever I begged for something fancy. But it turns out, while I wore designer coats to school, she was quietly using that same money to give another child the chance to go on their very first trip. In a world of flash and privilege, my mother chose to live quietly. Not to shine, but to make sure others didn't fade into the background. After that fateful phone call, I couldn't sleep for nights on end. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother walking into the school office, neatly dressed, holding a small notebook, with a look in her eyes that only someone who had known real hardship could understand. But what touched me the most wasn't just the times she paid for our field trips. My former teacher, the one who had called me, shared things I had never heard before. She told me my mother had left her personal contact information with the homeroom teachers for both me and my little sister, but she never used it to ask about grades or request special favors. Instead, she said this: "If there's ever a child who's short on books, missing pencils, or whose parents can't afford the required uniform or supplies, please call me before that child has to sit in class, silent, with guilt in their eyes." And she kept that promise. For years, she never handed things to the students herself. She always gave them to the teacher and said, "Tell the kids it's from the school," Or say a parent asked you to pass it along. But please, don't let them know it was me. It might sound like such a small thing. A book, a box of pencils, a proper school uniform. But for a child trying their best to fit in, a child in a system full of expectations and silent comparisons, that tiny gesture could be their last ticket to holding on to self-worth. And then, the birthday story? What the teacher told me next completely floored me. At our school, if parents wanted to celebrate their child's birthday in class, they had to register at least 2 days in advance so the school could schedule it. But not every parent remembered, and even fewer could afford to bring treats for an entire class. My mother, who lived just above a small bakery and corner store, quietly became the backup planner. For whenever a child's birthday was coming up and no parent had signed up, the teacher would text my mom the night before. The next morning, she'd stop by the bakery, pick up a few dozen tiny cupcakes, and bring them to school with her usual message. Tell the child their mom asked me to drop these off, and make sure the kids enjoy them, okay? For years, I thought my mother just happened to pass by and lend a hand. I had no idea it was all part of a plan, a quiet support system she'd built with the teachers. No title, no recognition, no organization behind it. But somehow, it lasted longer and meant more than any prestigious scholarship. Now, when I look back on the way my mom used to smile so gently as I told her about my classmates' birthdays, I finally understand. She wasn't proud because I noticed. She smiled because she knew some child out there got to feel happy that day. Without knowing their joy came from a stranger. And then, my teacher told me something that left me completely speechless. "Your mother once said this," she recalled. "I can't change how much each family earns, but I can try to make sure no child feels less than, at least not on the days that are supposed to bring them joy." In a world where kindness often comes with photo ops, certificates, or at least a thank you, my mother chose to give as if she owed something to her own past. No title, no conditions, no need to be known. And that, more than any honor, made her truly extraordinary. After years of quietly witnessing my mother carry out her own charity project, my life was turned upside down by an unexpected phone call from an old teacher, one that opened a door to a truth shaped by fate. It was a stormy afternoon when the phone rang incessantly, stirring a sense of unease inside me. On the other end was the warm voice of my former teacher. Yet beneath her gentle tone lay a quiet sorrow, as if she was about to remind me of a story I had never known. She told me that after my mother passed away 4 years ago, she didn't leave behind material wealth, but instead, a legacy of boundless love and compassion. The teacher recalled every detail as though it were her own memory. Whenever a child couldn't afford to join extracurricular activities or lacked school supplies, your mother was always there behind the scenes, arranging things so no one felt left out. Her words stirred a deep mix of pride and heartache in me. My mother, a simple and kind-hearted woman, had poured her love into children who never got to fully experience the joys of childhood. During our conversation, the teacher shared lasting memories from generations of students. She described how, time and again, my mother had quietly bought back joy for children left adrift in a world that catered to the wealthy. There were times, she said, when she would ask my mom to pick up books for the kids, and instead, my mother would gracefully step aside and let the teacher announce that the help came from a very special parent, someone who never wanted recognition for her kindness. She would only say that it was the best way to make the kids feel equal. "Not less than anyone else," the teacher added, her voice thoughtful and filled with admiration. Those words felt like missing puzzle pieces, slowly helping me understand the fuller picture of who my mother truly was. Alongside the hazy memories I had of her quietly helping my classmates, I now realized that her silent footsteps had created an invisible support system for the entire school community. She never asked for anything in return, never argued for credit, never sought applause. Instead, she chose to stay hidden behind practical acts of kindness, so every child could experience joy, feel equal, and never feel the weight of an unfair life. What struck me most in that conversation was the shocking realization that while I was growing up in a financially privileged yet emotionally harsh world, it was my mother who quietly filled in the gaps, the emotional wounds that less fortunate students often had to carry. I remembered the silent eyes of those children who couldn't go on field trips or join group events, the half smiles, the quiet moments sitting alone in class. Now, those moments glowed with a new light, shaped by the anonymous generosity of my mother. The teacher told me that some students, after receiving help from my mom, found a new sense of confidence, a boldness to keep trying even when their circumstances said otherwise. That story didn't just make me admire my mother more, it made me reflect on the power of kindness in a world growing more divided by wealth. Even the smallest act, a simple gift, can carry the power to change an entire life. And my mother, the woman who never asked for credit, had proven one thing. True goodness doesn't need to be seen. It just needs to exist, to warm the hearts that need it most. When the call ended, I sat there in the sound of rain, heavy-hearted yet deeply grateful. My mother left me not only the memories of a happy childhood, but a lasting lesson in humility, compassion, and the strength of silent action. From now on, whenever I think of her, I will not only remember the mother who raised me, I'll remember the silent hero who helped me believe in a better world, where every child deserves to be loved and valued. After that emotional phone call, I sat in silence for hours in the old kitchen, the same place where my mother used to do the smallest things, preparing breakfast quietly or wrapping birthday presents for children who weren't even her own. Suddenly, all those blurry, scattered memories fell into place, like puzzle pieces forming a picture so whole, so quietly devastating. I remembered asking her once, "Mom, today's Lucy's birthday. Where did you get that beautiful cake?" She smiled, placed her hand gently on my shoulder, and said, "Oh, I just helped her mom pick it up from the bakery. She was busy, so she asked me to grab it." And I believed her. Of course I did, because she was my mom. The kind of woman who never looked like she cared too much, but always showed up exactly when someone needed her most. Back then, her answers felt so casual I never questioned them. But now, I see them for what they really were. Lies. Kind lies. Lies tailored with precision, just to protect a child's pride. As kids, we think our parents are just regular people, until someone tells us the extraordinary things they did when we weren't looking. My mother tucked her wings away, so I would only see a simple, reachable woman. But beneath that quiet shell was a heart so large, it held space for children who didn't even belong to her. I started recalling the tiniest details. Why she often came home late on the first Monday of every month? Turns out, that's when the school updated the list of overdue tuition payments and struggling students. Why she'd go to the market earlier than usual on days there were birthdays in my class, so she could buy a fresh cake for a child who wouldn't have one. Why there was always a small envelope of money tucked in her recipe book? Now I know. It was her emergency fund. Not for us, but for some child who needed help right now. My mother never lived for recognition. She didn't post on Facebook. She never shared these stories at parent meetings. And she absolutely never wanted me or my sister to know what she did. Because to her, real kindness happens when no one is watching. I used to be confused. How could someone pretend for so long without getting tired? But then I understood. To my mom, that pretending wasn't a burden. It was her way of healing a wounded childhood she never spoke about. An old teacher once told me, "Your mother once shared how she was sent out of class because she had no books. She was teased for wearing old uniforms. She missed her very first school trip because her mom couldn't come up with $7. She grew up in a world that only saw price tags, not feelings. And when she had the power to change that, even just within the walls of one small classroom, she did everything she could, but never in her own name." Looking back, I see my mother everywhere in my childhood. Not in grand gestures, but in the smallest things. A birthday cake, a pen, the bright smile of a classmate I once thought, "Wow, their family must be doing well." But now I know, maybe they weren't. Maybe they just had my mother. And she gave them something far more valuable than money or gifts. She gave them the feeling of being normal. And for a child growing up with shame, that feeling, that quiet dignity of normalcy, is the most precious gift of all. My mother didn't leave me a big house. There was no $1,000,000 savings account, no precious heirlooms, just a few old dresses, a box of birthday cards, and a worn-out notebook. But now I realize she left me something far more valuable, a spiritual legacy, one that can't be seen but reaches straight to the heart. I used to believe kindness needed witnesses, that if no one saw it, if no one knew about it, then it would simply fade into oblivion. But my mother chose to plant her seeds in silence, not because she feared being seen, but because she understood. Sometimes the truest light only shines in the dark, where people act out of love, not for recognition. After learning everything my mother had done, I started to look inward. All those years I grew up in comfort. Did I ever really see the people around me? Did I ever ask why my classmate wore the same old clothes? Or why that kid never had a birthday party? I don't remember. And that's what hurts the most. I lived among children who needed to be seen. And somehow, I looked right through them. My old teacher, the one who told me all of this, said something that stayed with me ever since. You may never know how many children your mother saved from feeling forgotten, but what you can do is carry it on in your own way. That sentence felt like a mirror held up to my soul. I'm not my mother. I don't have a heart as vast as hers, nor do I possess her instinct to sense the invisible wounds in others. But she left me one thing, a choice. A choice to see instead of look away. A choice to ask instead of stay silent. A choice to continue instead of close the chapter. And I've started making that choice. Not loudly, not with a name attached. I quietly donate to my old class's support fund. I ask for the names of students who need books. I look for birthdays in my daughter's class and send cupcakes labeled "From an Anonymous Parent." I don't do it to become my mother. I do it so I don't let her down. And so her silent gifts can keep on giving. I've also started telling my daughter about her grandmother, the woman she never got to remember. But I don't tell her grand stories. I just share the mornings when her grandma would walk through the mist with a tin of cookies, the time she bought a new backpack and never signed her name, and the way she called other children kids of this world, not just somebody's child. And I tell my daughter, you don't have to be great, but if one day you see someone feeling lost, do something, even something small. Never let anyone feel unworthy of love just because of their circumstances. Because in the end, the greatest thing my mother left behind wasn't the quiet money she gave away. It was this feeling that every child deserves a place in this world, not because of how much money they have, but because they are human. And when I close my eyes, imagining my mother smiling somewhere in the sky, I know this. She never needed her name carved into stone. She only needed one thing, that someone out there would carry kindness forward, just like she once did.